Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the UNNC Planning and Zoning Committee meeting for what day is today, January 19th, 2022. We have
You
an
want
agenda.
me to share the screen with the agenda?
Sure. So an agenda was posted on Sunday per our rules 3 days in advance. And this is the agenda up on the screen now. We usually start off with approval of the agenda, but since COVID-19 response laws lapsed back in October, we are now required monthly to remind everybody, which is item number 1, and also to announce that we are continuing to operate under the previous COVID-19 regulations and not meeting in person because it's a state of emergency. And until such time we can meet in person, we'll be holding these meetings virtually as we are tonight. And that is the official announcement on number 1. That said, item number 2 is welcome to the Planning and Zoning meeting. So I call this meeting to order. We usually generally go around the room and make introductions. So you can choose to make an introduction if you choose. I'm John Arnold. I am the chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Committee for UNNC. I'm also an elected representative for Region 6, Jefferson Park, in the UNNC zone. I am an architect in multifamily housing. My experience is in a lot of planning and zoning issues. Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura Myers. I'm the co-chair of Planning and Zoning Committee and also a member of the board. And I live in Angeles Vista, and my background would be journalism and history, but of course, decades of doing land use stuff as well.
Great, thanks, Laura. Chris, do you want to go next?
All right, my name is Chris Carlson, and I am an elected member to the UNNC board from Area 4. I'm also the co-chair of the oil subcommittee with Steve Peckman. My background is I am a geologist, and I also have been involved in historic preservation in the community for over 34 years.
Great, thanks, Chris. Steve?
So I'm Steve Peckman. As Chris indicated, I am the co-chair with her of the UNNC Oil Subcommittee. I'm a resident of Jefferson Park for a long time now, and have been involved in oil issues for equally a long time.
Thanks, Steve. Carlos, if you choose.
Yes. Hi, guys. I'm Carlos Carrick, representative on the board, UNNC board here. I live in the West Adams area. Always been interested in planning and zoning for the area.
Great. Donna? We'll come back to you. Brittany? Oh, I'm sorry.
Taking me forever. Hello, everybody. Donna Jones, West Adams Avenue's acting chair. Are we talking about how long we've lived here?
Oh, whatever you want to say.
I've been here since I was the size of the kid on my picture. And before in the West Adams West area, Palm Grove, but over here 7th Avenue since 12 years old.
Great.
Hello, everybody.
Hey. Brittany?
Hello, good evening, everyone.
We can't hear you, Brittany.
Better now?
A little bit.
Sorry. Is my mic working now?
It's a little better. It's a little staticky, but it's good.
Okay, sorry about that. Been kind of having trouble all day with the mic, but good evening, everyone. My name is Brittany. I'm a neighbor and community organizer of the area for the past few years. Also just studying public health and urban planning as well. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Teresa?
Thank you, John. Hello, everybody. I'm Teresa Masonette. I'm also a UNNC board member. I represent the West Adams Avenues, and I'm on the executive committee as secretary.
Richard?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Parks, and I'm a longtime resident and also serve with Redeemer Community Partnership. Good to be with you this evening.
Great. And Lou? Or Theodore? Or Ted?
I'm sorry, my mic wouldn't go back on. I'm Lou Zilstra with E&B Natural Resources. Thank you.
And Ted, I think last but not least, Ted.
No pressure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ted Cordova. I'm with E&B Natural Resources. We're a member of the community as a business off of 2126 West Adams Boulevard.
Great. So,
John,
yes,
John, can I
yes.
just make one clarification? Though
Sure.
I'm the co-chair of the oil subcommittee at UNNC, I am not an elected member of UNNC.
Great, thank you. So we have an agenda that Laura and I put together this weekend, and we have a few items, an item relating to the Murphy Oil drilling site, and then two possible two council motions that are before the council currently that we have a possible action on. And then we have our regular public comments and follow up on previous cases. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? If there,
You've moved.
I move to approve the agenda.
okay, I have a second, please.
I will second.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. So we do have our standing rule that if you are a stakeholder in the region, in the UNNC area, that if you attend this meeting, you are a member of the meeting. And we do that on an honor system for our honor system that you are a stakeholder and you become a voting member of the committee. And whatever we vote on goes to the governing board at the following meeting. In this case, it will be in early March. Thanks everybody for voting on the agenda. Closing item number 2 or item number 3, public comments, 1 to 2 minutes per speaker on anything not agendized this evening that anyone wants to bring to the attention of the community. Anybody?
I'd like to mention that the secondary fence on Adams, the one beyond the original 4,000 West Adams at Edge Hill, has been reported, and we are going to follow through on it. It was reported way back when, but it looks like they swept it under the rug, and we don't know which rug it was swept under, but we've done it again.
There are a lot of rugs.
Yes, and we couldn't find it.
Good luck turning them up. Well, thanks, Donna. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to item number 4, which I'm going to hand the mic over to Laura to MC this discussion.
Thank you. So this is the item case number ZA 152270 for oil, I guess, PA4 plus PA6, dated September 14th, 2007. So that's the way it reads in the case file. But this is a current plan approval, review of conditions and compliance case at 2126 West Adams Boulevard. So in other words, it's the Murphy oil drilling site. And this meeting tonight is a consultation regarding this review of conditions and compliance at the site. We use the word operator. The company will respond to the questions that were posed back in October by community members, and as well as best they can provide some responses to a letter that was much more recently sent to them by the planning department's zoning administrator. And I use the word presentation by the site operator. I don't necessarily think that's a formal presentation so much as dealing with the questions that we had asked in October. In terms of, before we just do that, so everyone knows, right now on our tentative schedule, we are tentatively having another meeting, one more meeting at Planning and Zoning, where we would actually sort of take up the case itself to decide what recommendation, if any, we are making to the governing board regarding this case, and then followed by a governing board meeting where the governing board either listens to us or doesn't and does something else. John and I had penciled this in for these two meetings as Wednesday, February 2nd and Thursday, February 3rd. There is now some question as of today, Ted and Lou, you may not know this, as to whether or not they're really going to have a hearing in February versus now in March. So I have, and that is because the person at staff who's assigned, the new person who's assigned to go through the entire file, got the file yesterday. So they don't know how fast this is going to proceed. So I've gotten a promise from the planning department staff person who I have been dealing with that no later than Friday, January 28th, there'll be a confirmation as to whether or not the hearing looks like it's proceeding in February. If they don't know the answer yet at that date, that's our last Brown Act date before we issue the next week's agendas. So if they don't know an answer, we'll stick, for the moment, we'll stick to that schedule I just described. It may be that they do know a date in March, and then John will need to decide as chair whether we move forward on this quick schedule or if we take a little more time. So, and John hasn't heard this yet either. So this is news to him. So since I just heard it sometime today in the middle of a very busy day. Anyway, we had a presentation back in October from Redeemer and other partners, and we're asking a lot of questions, and Ted and Lou, I'm sure, took a lot of notes. And now they also have another letter from the zoning administrator. So we wanted to give them an opportunity where they're answering those questions that were already posed. And if that leads to then further questions, obviously this is a public meeting, but I'd like them to have the opportunity to kind of go through their answers kind of in a straightforward way, if that's the way they want to do this. So Ted, I don't know how you want to handle this. And at some point, I should also point out that the letter from the zoning administrator is in the advanced agenda packet, which you can see in the Google Drive on your agenda. And I have the ability to post it, but I don't know if we're going to want me to. But I want to turn it over to Ted and Lou.
So Laura, are you talking about the December 22nd letter from the ZA?
Let me see if
there was a lot of stuff in that packet.
Yeah, letter from Chief ZA to operator dated December 23rd, 2021.
23rd, okay.
Yeah, and that's, it's dated, yeah. Well, I didn't change the title. So it's dated on the actual letter, the 22nd, but the title of the letter is 23rd. It's only 3 pages. But then there is an attachment, which is 67 pages. So, you know what I mean? I wasn't really planning to post all of that on screen. So, unless it comes down to that, but I'd like to let our operators.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I just want to say Laura and I crafted the agenda to be till 8 o'clock for this item, and then the remaining time and before 9 o'clock for the remaining items. So we'll try to keep to that. Thanks.
Right. And and I guess we should explain, but we don't put, we're not putting times on the agenda, because another thing about AB 361 is if you do put times on the agenda, you actually can't finish before the time. So for example, at our board meeting earlier this month, we blew it and had to sit for 25 minutes because we were more or less finished with an item, but had to keep it open for 25 minutes because we had a time on it. And we had done and that wasn't fun. So we're not doing that. Okay, now I'm really, once again, Ted and Lou.
I appreciate it, Laura. Thank you, John. Thank you for having us. It's great to be here with everyone again. Laura and John, if it's okay with you, we were just going to do introduction, some background on us. It sounds like there may be some new people here. For some people, it might be repetitive of last time, but and then give a little bit of information of what's been going on. Answer the questions give you some information of our response to the city from referencing the December 22nd letter from the Chief Zoning Administrator, and we'd be happy to. Lou and I are happy to stay as long as everybody wants for questions and discussion, and also open invitation to, even if you guys can't keep going and there are still a lot of questions, we're happy to make appointments and sit down with anyone and individually and go over any questions or anything they want to do. So we're available.
Okay.
And have a certain amount of time that you want to
Well,
limit.
I think what we want is, as best you can, to answer as many of the questions that you have answers to. And if you want to start with that letter, if in other words, if you don't have the questions from our October meeting, but they may be identical, I'm just hoping that you can answer questions as were asked to us.
Sure. Okay. Well, we'll keep it pretty interactive then, and whatever is at
Okay.
the top of those minds, we can.
Right.
We can do.
So I will remind you a little bit from our October meeting. There were questions regarding methodology for ongoing inspections, the respiratory health impacts of living close to urban oil wells, which may or may not be part of the ZA case. And obviously, people were expressing concerns about the use itself continuing. So I think I need to also address that the specific case isn't necessarily about that. And I'm just looking at the notes. And that's what I see in the notes. I don't know if, John, you have other notes.
What do you want to say? I do have a presentation if you want.
Oh, yeah. Do you want me to make you a co-host?
Yeah, if you can.
I can.
Great.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
And so you are now a co-host, so you can share the screen. And I'm going to stop my video because I'm getting some internet. Your internet is unstable messages.
Okay. Can you see this?
Yep.
Okay.
Can everybody else see it though? Because I may be able to see things earlier.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Ted Cordova, and I serve as Vice President of E&B Natural Resources in the area of Public and Government Affairs. And Lou introduced himself tonight. He's Senior Vice President. He's head of our LA Basin Operations, Facilities, and team here in LA with over 40 years of experience in the industry and is a registered professional engineer in the state of California. So just, this may be a little bit repetitive. Let's see, why is this not converting over? We are a California-based energy company producing oil and gas for the state of California and its residents' needs. We have operations and facilities throughout the state, as well as Wyoming, Kansas, and Louisiana. And beyond oil and gas, our company has worked on other energy-related projects, including solar, fuel cell technologies, carbon capture, sequestration, battery storage, and water-related projects for beneficial reuse in the community. Let's see, this thing's not moving very quickly. Oh, here we go. For example, here's a solar project we implemented in Santa Barbara County. And we have a 23 megawatt project that we implemented in Kern County. So we're doing other interesting things as well as beyond oil, but the Murphy site, we are focused on oil production there. We've invested since taking over as operator in 2019 from Central Peak Resources. We also operate the Packard site within Council District 10. And again, we don't own the Jefferson site, nor do we own the one at 4th, and we don't own the site at Pico de Jini. Our operations are focused on what we call upstream. We produce oil and natural gas from where the oil field is, and then as a local producer, we then sell that into the local refinery. So we don't do any refinery. We have worked with the community on several different ideas, and we've appreciated those opportunities and ideas to work with the community on several initiatives that we think are good ideas. We've been working on the adjacent park, on making progress towards getting that opened up by working with the owner of the site, which is the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. We've had a great idea to help the monarch butterfly by planting native milkweed. So we're going to do that this year. And then there have been other good discussions and ideas within the community that we've had. So we appreciate those. Why my thing is not moving very quickly. There it is. Just a quick snapshot. We didn't get into this, but California is the 5th largest economy in the world. Currently needs around 1.8 million barrels of oil per day. And local and state production is only meeting about 25 to 30% of the state's needs. The majority of oil is coming from foreign sources, where it needs to be tankered into our ports like Long Beach and Los Angeles, where we have existing supply chain issues. California acts like an energy island, unlike other states in the US, where California has no pipelines that come into the state to deliver crude. And this is just kind of an interesting snapshot. We didn't give much background on our industry, but thought we would just share a couple slides with you on what's happening in California. This is a good slide. California is a leader among environmental regulations and oversight of oil and gas. And here's a quick snapshot of a partial list of regulating agencies from federal to state to local. I know there was a lot of questions on who regulates oil and gas. So wanted to just give you guys a snapshot of this. And obviously at the local level, we have South Coast Air Quality Management District. You have LA County Fire, CUPA, LA City Fire. You've got the Department of Planning. You have an Office of Petroleum Administration, Department of Building and Safety. So a number of folks that, including our state agency, CalGEM, could be and do inspect our site. I'm not going to dive too much into this for time, but this is just a snapshot of what the different agencies are responsible for. All right, so in the binder that we gave to the city is a lot of compliance questions, but just a summary of our compliance in 2021. In our app, it covers not only our compliance with not only the city's rules and regulations, but also external agencies. We're in good standing with all agencies at this time. In 2021, Murphy site had 13 inspections. So that's more than one per month. This includes CalGEM, LA County Fire, LA City Fire, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and others. In July of 2021, our state agency came out and did their annual inspection on the Murphy site for their annual site inspection protocol, and no issues were identified. We had multiple inspections from South Coast Air Quality Management District inspectors. We had one issue where a drain box needed to be fixed. We fixed it on site during the inspection and the inspector cleared us. South Coast Air Quality Management District inspected us again in December and no issues were identified. Murphy passed its annual Reg 4 inspection with LA Fire Department. And basically, if any issues arise, it's obviously our protocol, and we have a good track record of working with the agencies and taking corrective actions and returning the site to compliance. Most importantly, we have had no reportable spills nor any emergency event at the site. And here's some documentation of CalGEM in 2021, communication that we had with them, basically writing to us to confirm that CalGEM will not be issuing any NOVs for the July 13th, 2021 inspection that took place. We also asked them point blank, did EMB have any, received any notices of violations since taking over as operator from October 2019? And they wrote, I searched CalGEM's database and didn't find any outstanding notice of violations post October 2019 for the Murphy drill site at the Las Ciénegas oil field. Thank you. In December of 2021, just last month, we checked in with the South Coast Air Quality Management District and said, you know, what's our standing with you? That wrote back, Christopher, no new violations were observed during the inspection last week. All previous violations have been verified, repaired, and closed out. And that's from an air quality inspector at South Coast Air Quality Management District. This is an important slide. These are just community resources. Oftentimes people ask us, you know, beyond asking the operator, the company, you know, any questions about compliance or just raising questions or concerns about operations or anything that's going on. There's a lot of resources available to the community, including South Coast Air Quality Management District, who has oversight and is consistently on our site. The state agency is responsive. CalGEM, they've got a lot of resources and have a lot of oversight of our oil and gas operations. LA Fire Department as well as a resource. Hopefully most folks know that there's an Office of Petroleum Administration within LA City, which is, you know, not all cities have that specific role and oversight, but they are, you know, they're meant to be available to the community, answer any questions. In fact, we've been inviting them onto our site. We just had them at our site today. We had both the petroleum administrator and their new deputy petroleum, I guess, deputy kind of number 2 person who's new. Her name is Amanda Sitter. So we just had them on our site, took them through a site tour and walked them through a lot of our compliance and questions that the planning department had. So we walked them through a lot of stuff. And to us, that's very important to have people on our site. We think it's really critical to have city different departments come on our site, and we welcome it. You know, having 13 inspections in 2021, it's great. We're supportive of that, and we're on the record with multiple times over multiple years now of being supportive of the city moving action forward to have annual inspections for operators within the city. And we continually invite people and invite city folks, different departments to come on our site and witness different activities. And we've been very vocal about annual inspections because we think it's a good thing. So an update on our case. As you know, the purpose is for the city zoning administrator to review the site's compliance and conditions. EMB submitted our application for the city's direction back in July 2021. We did go over our proposed good neighbor provisions, including air monitoring, annual inspections, and additional reporting. The clarification from the city on the microturbines, which is in our letter. In December 22nd, the city did ask additional questions per the city's letter. EMB is in the process of responding. And Laura, you seem to be more up to date than we are about when the hearing date might come from the city. But we look forward to it. We're supportive of the city's review process. And ultimately, we would ask the UNNC board to consider supporting the city's review process of our application and support our proposed conditions. So what were the questions from the city planning department? Well, one was trying to get more information on our odor counteractant. In accordance with the rules of South Coast Air Quality Management District, we purchased and installed an aromatic diffuser system for potential odor mitigation. We specifically worked with South Coast Air Quality Management District to put a procedure in place for any future well servicing work. And this would be to neutralize any potential odor that would come from the rig. So it would be diesel. In 2022, we may anticipate using the system a couple of days per month. It just depends how much rig work there is, but that's sort of our estimate. We use a safe, non-toxic, and 100% biodegradable counteractant called odor control jasmine. And with this, we sent the city a material data sheet for further information per their request. The second question that we got asked by the city had to do with tracer surveys. And let me move this over here. So tracer surveys are on an injection well are common best practice in the industry and have been used in the industry safely for decades. The testing method is used to demonstrate that there is no fluid migration behind the casing, tubing, or packer. It is important to note that this type of testing is required by the state of California. Every 2 years, the state of California requires operators to run a radioactive tracer survey on their injection wells and to report those results to the California Geologic Energy Management Division, CalGEM. The radioactive material used, iodine-131, can be used safely, and the injection wells and monitoring and testing of those wells are within the jurisdiction of the US EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, CalGEM, and it complies with the California Department of Health Services regulations in Title 17, Division 1, Chapter 5, Subchapter 4 of the California Code of Regulations. You may also recognize this material. It's commonly used at hospitals for treatment and imaging solutions and in other applications beyond our industry. Operators must also notify CalGEM of the survey in advance so that a CalGEM inspector can witness the test. To run this survey, it typically takes 1 day that involves a small team of a couple of people and one small truck. We use a qualified certified third-party service firm, Production Data Inc., to perform the testing. There are no special permits required with CalGEM nor South Coast Air Quality Management District. At Murphy, we have a total of 8 injection wells that fall under this California requirement. And so in referencing the city's attachment, there was an email between Richard Parks and the California Department of Public Health. And in that email, which is in the city's attachment, I think kind of as a good conclusion where she wrote, Kathleen Harkness, the health physicist of the Radiologic Health Branch of California Department of Public Health, wrote back to Richard and said, I hope that this additional information will satisfy you and your staff that they were not in any danger of being exposed to radioactive materials during the well logging operations next door to your facility. The third question and final question that the city asked in their December 22nd letter was having to do with let's see, they asked us about our staff and how our shifts work. At the Murphy site, there are typically 1 or more personnel at the site to oversee the day-to-day operations. We have 2 shifts, a day shift and a night shift, each 12 hours per shift. The duties and responsibilities of a lease operator, day or night, include daily inspections of the operations, the wells, the equipment, and the facility. They are well trained in monitoring and maintaining equipment, compliance, safety, and our company's protocols include multiple daily reporting responsibilities. It is important to note that we have a lease operator working over the course of any given 24-hour period. However, it is not a legal requirement nor a regulatory requirement nor a condition of our lease to have 24-hour coverage. During our due diligence phase and prior to acquisition, we believe that the Murphy site could benefit from 2 shifts. which gives the site additional oversight. And we made the decision to implement that greater shift schedule. We have similar working coverage at 2 other sites in Los Angeles that are similar size and operation. In addition to the 2 shifts at the Murphy site, the site has multiple redundancies and safeguards in place, such as fence line air monitoring that have alarm protocols, multiple alarm systems for the site and equipment, 24-hour phone service, and well-regulated and approved safety and emergency and response plans. And the site has had no emergency events or reportable spills. So that includes what I had prepared for a presentation. We appreciate the board and community's time tonight. We're honored to be part of the community, and we're happy to partake in any discussions and answer any questions that you have. Thanks for having us tonight.
Oh, thank you, Ted. John, do you recall, other than the ones I kind of said before, any other questions from October?
Boy.
I know.
I'm back a while.
Well, I'll jump in. There was, you know, I know Steve had asked about the annual, not the annual inspection, but the air monitoring, and he had asked if we would commit to making the information public, and wanted to let you know that we are discussing that. We have made that information at our Rancho site through the annual inspection. And we also, at our meeting today with the petroleum administrator, we've provided her with a sample of the information as well too. And it started having conversations with her about how that could work. And one of the things that we've kind of haven't really figured out with the Honeywell monitors is that they're good monitors, but they're not great for like making data available to the public, and also just trying to figure out like how do you take complicated technical data and then make it easy for public to consume it and understand what they're looking at. And so, Steve, if that's something that you would like to work on with us, we'd entertain that as, if that might be something that the oil and gas subcommittee, you and Chris Carlson would like to meet with us on, we'd be happy to show you our air monitors, have you look at some of the data with us, and kind of have a brainstorm about where do you go from here. We've even entertained ideas of working with graduate students at different, universities. We reached out to the UC Bren School of Environment and had a great discussion with their director of communications within the environmental science and management department, because a lot of grad students are looking for great opportunities to work on projects. And, this could be something that would be right up their alley of getting their hands on air monitors and getting their hands on, the latest trends and technologies and what our best practices, and how to make the information available to the public, and how to do it in a way that makes it easy for the public to understand. So even ideas like that we're kind of entertaining, and we've thrown our hat in the ring of seeing if any grad students in that area would want to work with us on a project like that. But yeah, we would love to work with you, Steve.
I think Chris and I would be very happy to collaborate on that.
That'd be great. We appreciate that.
So Steve, did you had some other questions perhaps?
I don't have any questions right now, but others may have questions.
Okay. So, so let's open it up for questions. And again, the topic of conversation is, it's a double. It's the actual case, which is a review of conditions. And what that usually means is sort of a core question for the zoning administrator that the zoning administrator would ask him or herself. Are the conditions that are currently in place sufficient, And if not, what other conditions should we add? That's a review of conditions. So the oil drilling in Los Angeles, in broad brushstrokes, almost probably 100% of the sites, but although I never like to say all, but the vast majority of drill sites in Los Angeles got conditional use permits decades ago. And over time, site by site, one by one, those cases came back for plan approval cases, review of conditions. This site, we UNNC have been dealing with on and off since the mid 2000s. There have been multiple of these cases. This is a new case. And they start for different reasons. So that's sort of the core. The core of this meeting is answering the questions the zoning administrator asked, asking the questions we had asked, and more broadly speaking, are the conditions good enough? So this is not a case at the moment about is oil drilling good for us? You know, that I think that's an important topic, but that's not the planning and zoning case. So you know, I'd like to make sure we get the community questions on this case done. And John, at what point do you want to take back over this? Or are you letting me do this?
I was I think that we should let this run its course. I think the two other items won't take more than 15 minutes.
Correct.
So I think we should let this go to 8:15.
Right, but am I passing the gavel back to you at this point?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I will tell you as your moderator, Chris Carlson has her hand up. Yep. But John needs to call on her. He's muted, and Chris, you were muted too.
I'm muted.
Yes, Chris, here, please.
First, I want to thank Ted for the presentation. I thought it provided a lot of very useful information to the public, and certainly knowledge of how to follow for additional information. One thing that in my notes, I see that in several previous P&Z meetings, we've had representatives from the Redeemer Group publicly state that there were outstanding CalGEM violations on the Murphy site. And that seems in direct contrast to what CalGEM itself verified for the operator, and that there appear and verified that there have been no open violations on the Murphy site with CalGEM since the acquisition by this operator. So I think that's an important thing to clarify for the public, since there had been various statements to the contrary. And that's just an important thing. Thank you.
Ted, can you, oh, I'm sorry, Laura, you're still at the gavel. I'm sorry.
No, I'm thinking you're chairing.
No, I was gonna say, Ted or Lou, could you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris, for that comment. You know, we're in constant communication with agencies and want to obviously keep our site in compliance and fix issues and you know, take care of any corrective actions that need to be addressed, and keep our site in compliance. With CalGEM, you know, we categorically have not received a notice of violation from their agency since we took over in October 2019, and we have that documentation from CalGEM. We've to back up that statement. So, and we've given that information to the city.
Ted, can you stop sharing your screen so we can?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Tired of the orange.
The orange thing.
So Ted, I appreciate that answer. Were there any notices of violations that preceded E&B's taking over of the site that were outstanding? And if so, what's been done about them?
Yes, that's a great question, Steve. So yes, there were, you know, I don't know how far back you want to go, but previous operators, but there have been notices of violations with previous operators and
No,
previous.
I just want to know about outstanding ones when you took over the site.
Yes, it is our understanding that there were outstanding notices of violations that were with the previous owner, Sentinel Peak Resources, done with on site with the previous owner, and some of them we did have to address when we took over. And
So are any of those still pending, or are they all closed at this point?
They're all closed. They were closed, I believe, pretty quickly. I'd have to go back and look at the date that they were closed. But, you know, to be fair to Richard and Redeemer, that's maybe what he was referring to.
Right. So that's why I brought it up. So, so your knowledge is that any of the outstanding NOVs you had when you took over the site have been addressed, and they're successfully addressed, and they're all closed. There's nothing outstanding on any of those.
That is correct.
Okay.
Seeing any other hands, any other questions, comments? Follow-ups?
Yeah. So Richard and Brittany, did you have any further questions?
Brittany, you're muted. Still, there you go.
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions. Steve's observation is exactly correct. There was a correspondence from CalGEM dated January 13th, 2020. It was addressed to E&B. It was with regard to violations that were cited on a September 27th inspection, which was just prior to E&B's acquisition of the Murphy drill site, I believe on October 15th, 2019. Steve, so you're absolutely right. These the violations that we had cited previously, Chris, were ones that were issued in that transition period between Sentinel Peak and E&B.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
I do have a question just for clarification, Ted or Lou. Have you, as a part of this case, because it's just been going on for so long, I don't remember, did you ask for any of the conditions to be changed as part of your application? I think you did, but I can't remember.
I don't know. We didn't. You're asking, so let me make sure Laura.
Okay.
You're asking if any.
I think the history is. Let me say this. I think the history is that they asked you to turn in an application for a plan review, right?
Yeah.
You didn't just decide, wake up one morning and say, hey, we should do an application for a plan review.
No, it's the city directed us to file a plan
approval case. So in the course of doing that, have you asked for any changes to the, whatever the last time there was a plan approval and conditions? Did you ask for any changes?
We have not asked for any changes to the existing conditions, only proposing a few new ones.
Okay, and well, okay, so that's a change. What so I'll say it. What are the new ones, please?
Yes, so we're asking for an inspection for the city to add that to our conditions.
Asking for what? I'm sorry, it broke up.
For the city to perform an annual inspection. And then the second one is for the city to have a condition that requires us to have air monitoring, fence line monitoring. And then the third is an additional reporting requirement that goes to the city for any reportable spill or emergency event. And these are the 3 conditions that we also asked for. We've asked for them previously at a different site as well too. So they're consistent with something that we worked with the community and the council member in previous years for specifically on the Rancho site. So we think these are good conditions and want to move them forward on Murphy.
So, and then I know Steve has his hand up, but again, we've been dealing with this for so many years and it does get complex and confusing. I had thought all the way back in 1962 that the original zoning administrator had created a condition where you're not allowed to, not you, but anyone there is not allowed to generate electricity. They had to, in effect, purchase electricity from LADWP. And I know that that condition has been discussed on and off over the years, but I don't recall it ever being lifted by the zoning administrator. But do you have, I mean, because I think that's part of your plans, right? To try to generate some electricity there. To be more self-reliant is a nicer way of saying it. You're not trying to create electricity for us, but.
What you're referring to is condition 43 of an early zoning approval, and the zoning administrator lifted that years ago.
Oh, okay.
So 43 is no longer a condition on the Murphy site as lifted by the administrator in a previous ruling.
So since there's several of us on this call that probably have 3 feet of paperwork if we ever wanted to look at it, but you probably have it right in front of you. Do you remember, was it UNNC or was it, I mean, in other words, because I remember it being discussed at multiple hearings. And again, I've been paying attention to this. We're coming on 30 years, so it could have been anyway, but do you know if it was Lourdes Green, if it was UNNC, or was it, you know, who did that?
Gosh.
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't recall either, but yeah, there's, so in one of our letters, we outlined quite a bit, microturbines. Yeah, Lou's right, it is condition 43 of subsection F of section 13.01. PA4 condition 3 does not include condition 43. And then PA3 condition 3 dated March 13, 2006 also does not include condition 43. We do acknowledge that the condition was originally there as part of the ZA case back in April 5th, 1961.
Yeah.
But we also got communication from the planning department that if it's no longer there, then that supersedes the, you know, anything before.
Correct. Correct.
Because, you know, we were trying to figure this out too, and we've been in communications with them and asking them questions and not really, you know, getting the clarification that we were looking for. So, which is why we put it in very formally in our letter. And then PA2 dated April 15, 2005, page 25, condition 9, page 26, response to condition 18, and page 27, response to condition 43, references the microturbines multiple times. Also PA3 dated March 13, 2006, findings of fact, page 7, number 1, and PA4, page 7, number 1, also states that the site is improved with tanks, cellars, mud pits, pumps, generators, which is the key word, and an office building all located in the R4 zone portion of the site. PA5 dated June 30th, 2016, there were several references made to microturbines. So, you know, there's more.
So
there
it's
must
the condition was
be multiple
lifted.
zoning-
This is a long way of saying the
Y-
condition was lifted.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, that's our understanding. We're asking for clarification.
All right.
And look, if they, whatever direction they take it in, I mean,
Mhm.
they want to opine and say that it's, none of that's true and we don't know what you're talking about, then, then then we'll have that conversation during the review, but we'll bring it up.
Sure.
Steve has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, John. I had two questions. One is, Ted, will you share that clarification with us when you get it?
Absolutely.
Because I'm wondering if, I recognize that absence of the requirement may be lifting it, but a listing of items on the site may just be an inventory and not necessarily an endorsement. So it'd be good to get that clarification. The other question I have is actually aligned with what Chris's first comment was. I appreciate the PowerPoint that you did. Would you be willing to share that with us so it could be posted with the rest of the materials on the UNNC website?
Oh, he doesn't have to be willing. He has to do it now. Sorry. I'm sorry,
It's already
Ted. It
recorded.
is an AB 361 regulation when they amended the Brown Act. Any material that is distributed here in the meeting, it was supposed to be, if it wasn't in advance, it has to be, quote, distributed, meaning posted to things. So
Great.
you-
So then when how long before it would be posted? So
You
we
should
could
email
refer
me
the
tonight.
community to it.
you
Okay.
should email me tonight or tomorrow if you can.
And you'll have it posted before the end of the week?
Yes. Well, assuming I
Okay.
get it. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how big it is. I might have to play around with it to make it small enough for my uploading.
No, I get it. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And,
Thanks,
and Ted, I should have told you that in advance, but when
Yeah.
the legislature
Too late now.
revised the Brown Act in September, they made an additional clarification that essentially any materials that one discusses in a meeting must be made available to all members of the public. And we're using the agenda packets for that.
That toothpaste is well out of the tube at this point.
Yeah. I think there's even sort of odd verbiage on the agenda to that effect, but anyway. But you have to know what it means when you read the verbiage.
So my homework for tonight, Laura, is email you the PowerPoint.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So it
Thank
is 8:02. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay.
Okay.
So Lauren, we want to recap next steps for.
Yeah, the recap of the next step is we need to schedule a meeting at the Planning and Zoning Committee where it says discussion and action. And then the action is, and we need to familiarize ourselves better with the application. So right now we've been dealing with site conditions as seen by members of the community and responses to the questions that arise, but there's an actual case. So we'll need to talk about the actual application and make a recommended action to our board. And then the board has a meeting, whether it's the next day or 2 weeks later, but in advance of the public hearing so that we can, the board itself prepares a position. So if it's happening fast, the likely thing would be that this committee recommends sort of position and bullet points to the governing board and request that the governing board adopt the position and delegate to Planning and Zoning Committee to write a final letter to be approved by exec. It would be the normal route. If we find out that the public hearing is deferred all the way to March, we might have prepared the letter itself for the governing board as a recommended letter.
So next action potentially will be on February 2nd, which is this meeting on Wednesday. And then depending on,
Correct.
sounds like a flexible schedule, will either be the next day at governing board or the following.
Well, I'm hoping it's not a flexible schedule. I'm hoping we actually know
Yes.
before these
Flexible.
agendas. Steve has his hand up.
So I think we do have an action item out of tonight, though, which is Ted will be in contact with Chris and me
Yes.
about collaborating on the data collection and possible dissemination to the public. I think that would be a good project to work on as soon as possible.
Right.
I don't think we need the governing board's permission to do that.
No, we do not.
But
We do not. That is the purpose of the subcommittee. Okay. So we don't have a motion tonight. We're not posting the motion in chat. So the other thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting just for everybody, the chat function we leave open for everybody. And we had started using chat just to post motions, or if somebody wanted to say, I'm trying to raise my hand, but I can't, please call on me. But it's kind of expanded a little where people do some commenting, and often John or I might be like almost taking minutes in the chat. But the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment has basically, I would say, informed us that if we insist on using the chat, and we do, then the chat itself is to be incorporated and appended to our minutes. So I should have mentioned that before, but we're not really using chat tonight, but just for ongoing, this is kind of new news. And it's not a bad thing, it's just, you should know. Okay. And John, I don't know if you knew that either.
I did not know that.
Well, there we have it. But we're not really using it tonight anyway. Okay. Anything else on this? Because we could move on.
I'd say we move on.
All right.
The discussion has died down. Okay, thanks, Ted. Thanks, Lou. We'll be talking to you throughout, and we'll be seeing you on or about February 2nd.
Right.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
Have a
And
good
I
evening.
do hope everybody, or a lot of you, stay, because the next two items are kind of interesting, even though they're not related to oil.
Laura, you have to stay.
I am staying. No, everybody. Brittany, Richard, Chris, Steve, please stay, because we have an item on don't abandon your properties and let them burn down. And we have an item on how to well, I don't even know how to say it, but sort of helping legalize backyard housing. So
We rely on all the eyes and ears we have around UNNC to inform us, Laura and I, as the co-chairs of the Planning and Zoning Committee, to know what's going on in the city. So one of our one of our board members informed us of a few council motions that were going on without making a meeting. We did not have a meeting about it, but we were informed of these council motions going on. And we look to see what's going on in the city and see how it might pertain to UNNC. And these two popped up as being fairly relevant and fairly current. And the first one, which is item number 5 on our agenda, which is council file number 220029, which is fairly recent. I think it's just a month ago. Oh no, I'm sorry. What was the date on this? It was more recent.
you know what, I don't, well, it was this year.
Yeah,
It was 2020,
So in the past-
2022, so it's
in the
very
past,
recent.
2.5 weeks, council member from the 2nd District, Paul Krikorian, put this in front of the city council, which basically says that properties that are vacant, that are then subject to fire, that the owners should be responsible in some manner for those fires. And the 3 points of being responsible that are in this motion, and we can discuss them at our leisure, is that, sorry, I have to I just read this 10 minutes ago, now I'm refamiliarizing myself with it. So If a property is vacant over 180 days, a property owner must protect those properties. What protection means was not defined. That the city would then also create a department where inspections of those protections are held. So the city would have a follow-up program that was sponsored by the city. And then finally, which I think is fairly interesting, is that if there is a fire at an owner's property, that owner is responsible for all damages and costs that come about from those fires. So if an adjacent property gets caught on fire, if the firefighters have to expend a lot of money to put out the fire, all the costs would be borne by the property owner. And obviously this is meant to incentivize owners being responsible and incentivizing for them to take care of their properties and hitting them where it hits them hardest, which is in the pocketbook. So we thought this was particularly current for UNNC because we've had several fires. Some of them are multiple fires in single buildings over the course of weeks where we've lost buildings in the neighborhood. And all those properties that did have fires were vacant. And regardless of the source of the fire, this is saying that the property owners are responsible for securing those properties and then being responsible if fires do occur in them. So that is the motion which Laura is showing on the screen. And that's what we have to do whatever we want with. We can support it, we can change it, we can give our suggestions. Laura.
Okay, so my initial response was, no, this is nowhere close to good enough. I mean, I like the last paragraph where, pursuing remedies from those owners who create these nuisances to recoup the cost. But my opinion, and I don't know if this is just personal, but my opinion is an owner should not be permitted to vacate a building, period. If it has tenants, leave the tenants. If there are no tenants, keep the lights on, keep the water running, keep the heat on, put in a caretaker if you must, but do not vacate the building. So I think because that is what leads to squatters, fires. And again, as John said, we've lost 2 houses. We've had severe damage to a house in Jefferson Park on 31st Street. I don't know the final result, house duplex actually in Victoria Circle lost to fire or half lost fire. Don't know the final result. And I'm losing track, but there's another one. So in the last 2 years or 3 years.
Steve, you ever heard it?
I appreciate Laura's position, but I would like to make a motion to support this motion. But however, I think it's not very valuable because at this point, CD10 has no ability to vote on any motions. We don't have a representative on city council. So, yeah, I think we could recommend to UNNC to support this motion, but I think we have a problem with representation in city council that's fundamental to any further action by the city.
So that is absolutely true, Steve. And if we were allowed to see 10, it would probably go into a circular file or something close to a circular file. But we do have the ability to write CISs, which go to whole councils. So when
Great.
these come up for motion, we actually do have a way to insert ourselves into all council members' lives.
Right, but we still don't have a voice for our community at the city council for discussion and votes on motions, which I find reprehensible at this point and should be corrected.
Right.
So my opinion is, so as a motion, Steve moved to accept this as it is. We can take a second or we can discuss.
Well, if nobody seconds, we can just move on. If somebody seconds, we discuss the motion.
So I would say I think 180 days is too generous.
Yeah.
And I think that's 6 months, and it's like a lot can happen in 6 months. I almost wanted. I like the whole concept of it, so I support Steve's motion in generally. It's almost. I want it to be and short of not having any buildings vacant, get a permit to allow it to be vacant, which will put some onus on rather than just locking the door and leaving. So you have to go to the city, go down to LADBS, get a permit so they know about it, and they do get inspections, or they are required to check boxes or provide clearances in some way. But I think anything to make it onerous, short of requiring to maintain a lease that you don't want, I think that would, yeah, it would solve a lot of them, I think. Chris.
You know, I'd like a better definition of vacant. For example, if a building is vacant and is undergoing renovations to be put, you know, for a new potential tenant or commercial business, you know, it can take easily 180 days. It can take that long just to get the city to get some inspectors on site, much less to waiting for supplies now with so many of the log jams with COVID. So, you know, if a building's being worked on, even if it doesn't have an occupied tenant, is that quote vacant or is that not vacant? I mean, I think we have to really, yeah, I think a strong effort to put constraints and strengthen the responsibilities for buildings that clearly have essentially almost been abandoned. But I think we have to be careful not to make it sort of onerous, you know, with what we know current conditions are. It's, you know, and so I'm not sure if vacant would, a building that's empty but being worked on and doesn't have an active tenant, is that considered vacant? Because 180 days could easily be consumed in the current permitting and construction environment.
John, may I answer that?
Yes. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
I think if a building is in plan check or has a issued permit, it's not considered to be vacant and abandoned. I mean, functionally, it might be vacant and abandoned, but I think on the city side, that would not be something that is referred to the city's vacant and abandoned buildings unit. And then broadly speaking, my concern is, again, 180 days seems to be awfully long. I agree with John that maybe, you know, in other words, what happens is that first they vacate the building, then whoever they are, apply for something. But what we need to remember is that when a building catches on fire, it is a life and safety hazard, not just to the squatters who may be in there and set the fire, the trespassers, but to the adjacent buildings. So on 24th Street, when the house burned, it also burned the house next door, for example. The house on Wilton Place burned 4 times, and the vagrants continued to live there despite the fact they were now living in a burned hulk. I mean, they didn't even move. So I feel 180 days is too long. I understand Steve's position. I understand that we don't want to create barriers to development or to rehabilitation, but you know, I mean, we've just seen so many buildings burn, and this is, you know, I'm not going around town. There's so many, if you actually research this topic, there's many more around town than there are here that have burned.
And obviously the some and CD2. I wonder if there's differing standards for commercial versus residential. Because I can imagine a residential building being vacant. There's no reason for it to be vacant.
Right.
So I'm wondering if there's unless they're proposing to tear it down eventually, in which case they should be getting a permit for that intent, versus I think that the thing we're all up in arms about is this neglect, just locking the door and walking away and waiting for it to burn, whether it's with that intent. But I wonder if a developer has an intent that's very clear and it's in the city's file, or if a commercial property can't be least, which is fairly common these days. But I'm just wondering if there's some nuance there that could tease out intent versus neglect. Carlos was next.
Yeah, this is a touchy one for me. I guess maybe because I'm not too clear. Um, I guess for the most part, right, commercial, residential, industrial. Um, I've certainly went through this before where, not just me, I've seen it where, some of the property owners, they don't have the resources or the support to deal with things like this. And this may be a unique situation where, yeah, someone just kind of, took the property and locked the door and walked off. But and I went what kind of got my wheels turning was when Laura mentioned squatters. You can't get rid of squatters. They have a legal right to stay there, and if they destroy your property, obviously you can't get them out. You're not able to do anything legally, and then you get sued too. So I guess I'm just trying to figure this out, and permits and all that other stuff. I'm just not getting a warm or fuzzy on that.
Thanks, Carlos. Chris?
One of the things that just looking at the document as a whole, although its purpose seems good, almost everything about it is a response to after the fact, after something has burned. And it seems to me we should look for more proactive ways to deal with, say, vacant and abandoned, which was the word that Laura used, how the onus should be on meeting proper, closing the building so it can't be entered. So, and a responsibility to maintain its integrity rather than penalty, than coming back after a fire and say, it's this, and this. It just seems to me there are some additional and maybe thoughtful things that could be amended to this motion that's more on the preventive side. And collaboration between property owners in the city to deal with things like break-ins by vagrants that then set fires in houses. How, if it's, I just think it could use some more thought and discussion with the community, as well as clarification of some of the terms. But I think it's a important topic, and I think I'm pleased to see the city taking it on to try to address it. But I it's the first time I've seen this document, and I'd love to be able to think further and find out a little bit more of what went into crafting it, what thought, and maybe some additions that could be done. But that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura.
Right. And I will say, when there are vagrants, squatters, it is really difficult. So Carlos and Teresa may well know about this, but at the Isidore house next door to the South Seas house, so city owned, and it's empty. I wouldn't say it's abandoned, but it's empty. And we've had terrible issues with squatters breaking in, but including tunneling up from the crawl space and through a closet and into the house. So they weren't breaking in the windows and the doors. Somehow they found a way under the house and up. And and Donna knows this too, so she could be more could elaborate more if we needed to. But that's where I come from. It's like, if it's vacant, it's gonna quite likely that it's gonna be squatted. If it's never vacated, whatever the it is, the likelihood of a squatter who then, they're not trying to burn down these houses, but they're trying to keep warm usually, and or they're mentally ill, and it's and or. So I'm big on not letting it get vacant at all, and that may not be the position UNNC would take. So basically, since it's now 8:24, it would seem to me that the question for tonight is, do we want to craft a position? We're not going to craft a position tonight. And then just so everybody knows, these community impact statements, we now have a little bit of a formula. And what we know is we have to write them out completely. They can be no more than 1,850 characters and spaces, because then we have the whole long, the United Neighborhoods of the Historic Arlington Heights, West Adams, and Jefferson Park Communities Neighborhood Council. That takes like 100 characters and spaces, just saying that. So, so what would our position be? I mean, we would say support, oppose, or support if amended. I think Steve was suggesting support, but I think John and I, though we have different positions, we're suggesting support if amended, right?
Yeah.
But we're not going to do that tonight. The question is, should we give John and Dorit, who's the one who proposed that we do something, should we say, yeah, let's do it, and let's bring it back, or let's do it and just submit it for the governing board agenda? Because it would be, if we bring it back to the February 2nd meeting, it will not be on the February 3rd agenda, because we have to print the proposed CIS onto the agenda.
So just want to add on to, so in the chat, I put down notes of everything that everyone said, or paraphrase them. And it's not our job to legislate or to make the perfect piece of legislation. It's perfectly acceptable for us to say, we accept the intent of this, and we have these additional ideas. So we can do it any way we want, but we aren't the ones crafting the legislation to change it in certain specific ways. So I would say that we pass a motion to support the intent of this, which is to, whether it's penalize or incentivize not to vacate or penalize vacation of properties. And then we bring forward some of these ideas as maybe a list, and then
Yeah, we could do that. But it would be, again, it's technical, it's support if amended. And I see some other hands are popping up.
Teresa.
I second that emotion. Thank you, John.
Great. So
I second the motion. I was
fine
making a
with
joke.
teasing out some of these ideas and fleshing them out, and then maybe next meeting we can.
Well, that's my question. Will we flush them out at the meeting, or just flush them out and pop them onto the governing board agenda, or would that be dependent on the time frame on this?
We can always, if say this is going to vote before we can get all this done in the next month or two, I would say maybe give the authority to write it, and if it's still active by the next P&Z, maybe we can just bring it back and change it.
Donna has her hand up.
Hi, yeah, I think like some of you have mentioned, because of where we are, it's imperative that we make it to do something, add something to what he said, because properties that are not secured, not looked over, become the neighborhood's problem. And because maybe West Adams Avenues or other neighborhoods pay attention, most don't, and we lose too many properties because people are not paying attention. So I really want to see something, said or added to what, because the idea is a good idea. Unsecured properties, properties that are not looked over and just walked away from, are not good, and it gives them one more space to build a 4-story building next to a historic property. So it means something to me.
So thanks, Donna. So I made a motion to support the intent of this and maybe expand it by some of these ideas here. What I didn't, and Teresa seconded, what I didn't say was give the authority to write a draft CIS to put in front of the governing board at the next opportunity. So I would suggest that we add that to the motion.
Yeah, we haven't even, I'm still typing the motion. So.
And so Teresa, that's why I'm going to add that to my motion to give us that authority so we can get on this. And so if you accept that,
yes, I do, John.
Great.
Is that your motion?
Yes. Yep, generally, paraphrase, yes.
Well,
Uh,
okay,
sorry.
I mean, I will second Teresa. See list of ideas above.
Okay, now we can discuss that. Carlos.
No, I just wanted to say thank you to Donna. She just kind of cleared everything up for me, just that fast. Thank you.
So with that, any other
You're welcome, my brother.
any other comments, questions? Okay, I would say we call the vote. Get this one through. Okay, all those in
Wait a
favor.
minute here. I'm doing that. The clarity is that unsecured buildings are a problem for communities. Is that the clarity you're referring to?
That question for me, Laura? Or
Yeah. Was that is that the clarity that the unsecured buildings are a problem for local communities?
Yeah, the unsecured buildings and kind of left in, I guess disarray, right? For just a vacant lot, that kind of thing. Because I was just, like I said, my confusing part was, hey, if I've got a house and I redid it and it's there, for sale, and some vagrant comes in there and burns it to the ground.
Yeah,
Why
that'd be
am I being
bad.
punished for that? Right. So
Right.
Donna was able to clear that up for me. Because obviously we've seen, places that are just abandoned.
Right. Okay.
Right? And
So we can take that clarity when we write something, because I want to get everyone's comments and do a whereas.
Yeah, whereas, but only 1,850 characters in space.
Which isn't much. Okay, so I'm gonna call the vote, which will close the discussion.
Sure.
If everyone who's in favor of this, please raise your visual hand or your yellow hand or whatever color hand you have. Okay, that looks pretty good. Anyone opposed? Okay, seeing none. So as everyone lowers their hand, the motion passes. Great.
Okay, and just FYI, this is still sitting in purgatory. It's a motion that was referred to the Public Safety Committee on the 7th of January, and it's gone no further so far.
So it may take a while.
Correct.
So the next one's a little more complicated, but it dovetails pretty precisely with when we reviewed the housing element several months ago. One of the things that was a hot topic of ours was how to incentivize lower income folks with making affordable housing and how to find mechanisms to do that. And lo and behold, this motion came up by Councilmember Nuri Martinez, who wants the city council to implore the city administrative office down below at the very bottom, with the housing department, planning department, and the building safety, to report back on a program that would help low-income city residents and CLTs, which are community land trusts, to build and upgrade accessory dwelling units through new financial incentives, which should include or may include financing for land acquisitions and construction, leveraging SB 9, which is the state law that allows R1 lots to be subdivided and to have ADUs added to each parcel, up to 4 units per existing R1 lot. Identifying low-income homeowners at risk of foreclosure and connecting them to community land trusts, and utilizing REAP properties. REAP properties are properties that are in out of code compliance that have been flagged by the city. Gathering those into community land trusts. And there's some backup information up above. So this one's a little more complex because when this was first described to me, the takeaway was it was the city paying illegal units to be upgraded or legalized. And I think there's an aspect of that, but I think it's basically for units that have been put in place illegally or otherwise, or units, ADUs. How do we incentivize less well-heeled homeowners to either make them legal or to develop them, and what mechanisms can be produced there. So there's no mechanisms in this motion, but is to direct the city administrative officer to look at it and to report back and how this can happen. Any comments, questions, discussion? This is a little more complex than the last one.
Right. Well, John, I would just jump in, and I have no idea if anybody else is even in the room, much less raising their hand. But the very last bullet point, utilizing REAP properties for CLTs. I don't think Ms. Martinez or Mr. Cedillo understood that a REAP property is not owned by the city.
Correct.
It remains owned by the private property owner, and there is no mechanism in the REAP to take the property, to eminent domain the property. So I would think we should, whatever else we say, note that they should not be spending any time investigating that, because the city doesn't have eminent domain power on REAP properties.
Carlos.
Laura, can you quickly just define REAP for everybody present?
Yeah, it's a rent escrow.
Okay.
I don't know what A stands for, properties, but these are, well, they're the opposite of abandoned or vacant. If something is abandoned and vacant, they're not allowed to be in REAP. These are occupied properties with renters that are in miserable shape. And the rent is escrowed, goes to the city or some entity to do repairs instead of going to the owner. So if the property becomes vacant and abandoned, it has to be removed from REAP. But that still doesn't give the city the right to transfer the ownership to anybody.
Right.
Carlos.
Yeah, and guys, this is a very unique, well, I say unique, sensitive area for a lot of folks, as it is private property.
Right.
And thank you for clearing that up for me, Laura, because I was thinking, are we talking about taking people's property from them?
Well, that last one sure reads that way. That's got to go.
Right. Because, I guess, and not, if you're not familiar with that process and what it looks like, and Laura, you're spot on. There are some dastardly folks, right, that don't do the right thing. But the right thing, the wrong thing could be smoke detectors, and it's in REAP.
Right.
So I would, it would be, to me, I would see it would be pretty unfair to take someone's property because they didn't have a working smoke detector. Just my thought.
Yeah. But what about, I guess what John and Dorit wanted to talk about is how the positive side of this, not the negative.
No, and I understand that, but I guess the thing that, again, some of the reason why I came in here, as, a small, tiny investor, right, was to see, how, I can contribute to the board and the neighborhood, right, to work, work with folks and, obviously kind of make things a lot better. And when I hear things like that, it concerns me because, I have seen cases where I've seen people lose, properties behind that sort of thing, where there was smoke detectors weren't in place and they were in REAP. And if someone's able to come through and the city's able to take that property from them without really, it just doesn't seem that fair to me. And just to give it to someone else and then give them the resources they need to put smoke detectors in there. And maybe I'm reading into this wrong, right? And like you said, maybe it's a bit more complex and I'm just looking at the surface, but that's kind of where my head is.
I think you're right, Carlos. Of the 4 bulleted items at the bottom, which is just possible inclusions, that one's the negative one. That one's the punitive one, whereas the other ones are trying to be constructive, find ways to get to a certain goal, which is more affordable housing. That's not related to developers, which is a little more organic and utilizing tools such as SB9 to make it happen versus people who can't afford it and they just, the only choice they have is to sit with their properties and status quo. Whereas maybe there's ways to allow these loopholes, which some people will take advantage of, to actually do a community benefit, which is what I read from it. And from your comment, that's 3 positives and a negative. So maybe we'll just focus on the positives. Teresa.
Thank you, John. My other thought is that, yes, we can help them correct the problems with the unit they have in the back. But once it becomes a legalized ADU, their property taxes are going to increase. And there's nothing the city can do about that because that's regulated by the county. So we're helping them on one hand, possibly, but also if their property taxes go up and they were even unable to maintain their property before, what's going to happen now?
So I'm wondering, Mills Acts are state laws that allow property taxes to be reduced, giving incentives for historical preservation. Maybe there's something similar that can be done to alleviate property taxes if affordable housing, covenanted affordable housing is created, rather than just say, oh, now your property is worth X amount. Maybe there's some bargain you can have. You won't, that puts a restriction on the property like Mills Acts properties do, and gives you tax relief. So maybe there's something like that. Laura.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, it's interesting because in the 3rd paragraph, they reference the city, second sentence, city can create new financing tools to help low-income property owners. And forget the rest of it, to upgrade and build additional ADUs. But none of the bullet points identified those specific financing tools for existing owners. I mean, there's financing for land acquisition and construction, that'd be for the CLTs. How to leverage SB 9 incentives for affordable housing and CLTs, that's not a financing tool. And identifying low-income homeowners at risk for foreclosure and connecting them to CLTs so they can sell their property.
Yes, they would sell it.
As opposed to low or no interest loans to correct the safety of those structures, bring them into legality, and then rent them. I mean, in other words, there's no financing tool for that that's even referenced here.
So
which was one of our concerns in the housing element, that they have all these ideas, but no, on a practical basis, yeah, maybe 100 loans a year. Well, that's, not enough. And we said that.
Maybe a response back is to clarify, to say that, yeah, you say the intent, which is the first 3 paragraphs, isn't quite synced up, and with below, and then below seems a little half-baked.
Right.
And so I wonder if we can just, as a part of it, we could just expand the bullets at the bottom by omitting or adding, and just making them a little bit smarter, a little bit crisper, and adding some nuance to them.
Right.
But with the idea is to support the general idea of it, and just adding our own thoughts. And I think some of those thoughts already exist in our housing element response.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I think we already this feels like we wrote about it already. So is this another one we're going to move forward, we think? I'm going to stop the share, if that's okay with you guys. I can't, I mean, I'm when I go online to see where the status is, I think I end up sharing the web instead of this thing. So I'm going to stop the share for a minute. And Chris has her hands up, and maybe others, and I'm going to go back out on the web to see the status of this
one. Chris?
Okay, I wasn't sure if I had the floor. One of the things that in that first paragraph, it's talking about often housing, substandard housing, non-permitted housing, housing that does not meet often does not meet city codes. And one of the things that, if you have registered rental housing, and if you have any rental housing, you are supposed to be registered with the city. The city has what's called a SEP inspection program that mandates repetitive inspections, usually once every 3 years, for the city to have an ability to note the condition of a property. And the concept of a SEP inspection, right now it's only limited to registered rental units, but it's the kind of thing the city should expand to all properties, because the level of code violations and illegal construction in this city is pretty horrendous. And we've had a long history of garage fires from space heaters and whole families getting lost, as well as structures. And some of that was decreased with the advent of the SEP inspection program. But it seems like the solutions don't address the conditions that the letter talks about, because there's sort of two parts of a larger problem, and all the incentives don't give the city a handle on unregistered, illegal, overcrowded, non-compliant, converted garages, and maybe ad hoc housing that's been added. So until you have some sort of uniform inspection, you're only looking at one piece of the elephant. And so a SEP inspection is fairly inexpensive to fund. It's like, I think $12, I forget what, but it's a minor cost, and it could be expanded to all city properties. So the city has a way of identifying problems before they take lives. And also then you'd have a targeted list of properties that would comply for some of these other programs. It's just a thought.
Carlos?
Chris is amazing. She's spot on, right? I definitely agree that for those units, you should be also including SEP in there as well, because I do agree that with that, I think they're still doing it annually, right? And you're right, because I think it's like up to like even like $30 a year or something like that now. But that would help out a great deal once those units were in compliance, right, with the city's codes, and they would be maintained that way. And I'm sure that's something the city would love to go ahead and have. What city wouldn't love to have extra revenue? So, but more importantly, yeah, that program that works works kind of hand in hand with that whole REAP process as well. If it was expanded throughout, for the ADUs, that would work too.
So how does that address affordable housing that seems to be searching out code violations? How is it? So the intent of this is to help incentivize legalization of units and to incentivize or assist homeowners who can't necessarily afford that to produce affordable housing.
Well,
so how does that dovetail?
I think if you have a coherent and comprehensive way to inspect and know the status of what structures are in, then you have, for example, an already occupied illegal structure isn't going to add any affordable housing, but it may be supplying highly substandard and at-risk housing. And so the city, if it understands that this property falls in that category, it could have an incentive program where you waive any back permit fines, you waive future permits, and you provide some resources to help, if there's structures that can be brought up to code and be maintained as quality housing, then you have a way to do that. For other things, there might be multiple categories that properties fall in, and you'd have different, systems to address adding housing where it can be added, preserving housing where it needs to be preserved, and making the housing non-substandard, non-high risk, converted garages with overloaded electrical systems and space heaters with too many people crowded in it. You can address housing in a more comprehensive way. That's my thought.
Okay, got it. Laura?
Yeah, so to be specific, right now, the SEP, however it's pronounced, but it's the Systematic Code Enforcement Program, is $67.94 per unit per year, so $68 a year. I like the idea of somehow everything getting inspected every few years. But we had an issue here. I don't know. I mean, they didn't do this in Brentwood, but there was a program called PACE, Proactive Code Enforcement. And what we found in our community is that little old ladies were being cited by PACE because they had stuff stored on their front porches, which isn't exactly pretty, but shouldn't be how the city's spending its time doing code enforcement, right?
Mhm.
And I think with 2020 hindsight, there was a real racist equity and justice issue behind that effort, or lack of equity and justice, because I really think they were targeting areas that were filled with people of color and didn't really do these PACE inspections in other parts of town. So, I don't remember why this was happening. It might have been happening even before I moved here, but the results were never very good. So, so I'd be concerned about that, but I'm also concerned about a motion that just says, well, let's legalize them all. So, I mean, I don't know that I'd want UNNC to take the position of, yeah, let's make them all legal and give them money so they can be prettier. That doesn't seem right either, because there's so many property owners across the city who are doing it right and legally already. So, where do you balance all of this with the laudable goal of creating more safe housing?
So
That's a
one
question
is-
for you, John.
this
I
is-
know
this-
you weren't the mover of this motion.
So this one is complex, and I think there's again, we aren't legislating. We're either supporting the idea to it's basically do a report. It's not to pass anything like the
Right.
previous one, which is they, pass a law that says you have to do certain things. This is more about getting a report. So my feeling is we can support if we want to, the idea behind it, to create affordable housing through some mechanisms to help people with lesser means, and to perhaps look for ways, as have been suggested in the motion or by Chris and Carlos, to help this to happen. What that report says and what the action is yet to be determined. But I think showing support and then maybe some other ideas based on what our conversations have been can't hurt if we want to do that.
Right. Well, and again, it aligns in some ways with the, what we wrote in the housing element, and then it doesn't, because it doesn't have a practical solution.
Yeah.
Just as our comment about the housing element was the same. It's like, yay, great idea. You have to have more than 100 loans a year.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's just nothing. The other thing I will say, again, years ago, when much of the West Adams area was blanketed by community redevelopment agency redevelopment plans. So the residential ones, Adams, Normandy 4321, Normandy 5, I mean, the ones that were residential, not commercial, they did have programs where they would have low or no interest loans for general rehabilitation, but they would send a consultant, and it wasn't that you could get a loan to do the things just that you wanted to do. The consultant would come up with a list of all the things that would have to be done. So these loans became 50,000, 75,000, 100,000, and the people, even at zero interest, it's still a loan, they had to pay it off and they didn't have the money. So how do you create a program that would bring the backyard non-permitted housing into some degree of compliance without forcing a homeowner to end up borrowing so much money that they're bankrupted just on the paying of the loan payments, even if it's 0 or 1% interest?
Okay. So what should we do with this?
I think this one is going to have to be a punt to come up with better ideas to present, because I think this one's very complex. I think we need to punt it to the next meeting and ask Dorit to actually share her ideas, because she ended up having to work tonight and that's why she's not here. And maybe everybody who's not a board member, that's not good. I think we just need to punt it for another discussion on the 2nd of February.
Okay. So I just put our ideas that everyone brought up in the chat, which we will save so we can
Right.
resurrect that as a basis.
Yes,
of next
exactly.
Okay, I accept that. I think that's good. This one's a little more complex and it's not supporting. It is just it is a report. So I think there's a little more room to
Mhm.
make suggestions, I think. Okay, if everyone's on board with that, we can move on to the next item, which is follow up on previous cases. Or do you have anything?
I can't remember. I can't remember. I don't have long COVID, but I do feel like I'm COVIDed out. And I can't remember things. I mean, I have long lockdown syndrome.
Yeah, I can't think of, I don't know of anything that's going on specifically in UNNC that about past cases. You know, I see things we approved going up. I see the 2 CIM buildings.
Well, I
in
will
Crenshaw
say
going up.
this, I do want to invite PATH, people assisting the homeless, to either come to this committee or just go to the board, but in the 6:30 to 7, to give us a presentation of what they're doing on Montclair near Adams, and then the Gramercy apartments, which are not on Gramercy, they are on 4th and Washington. Because on the website, I mean, it looks like they're coming to completion. So the announcement here is it looks like they're being completed. Those 2 projects are getting really, at least the one on Montclair is getting very close to being done. But it's linked financially to the rehab on Gramercy and 4th. Did
So
you
these
work
aren't
on
the-
that, John? Was that
No, I
one?
did not. So these aren't the 2 abode communities projects on
No,
Adams.
no, this is
one
PATH.
behind. This is one behind on Montclair.
This is the one halfway down the block on the west side of the street.
Yep.
Where we had dealt with it as a committee was pre-PATH. The prior owner had come to us with the original application, which was just a market rate project that we didn't have a lot of ability to suggest changes. There wasn't a lot of entitlement involved with that. It was just a specific plan approval. But he didn't build it. He sold it to PATH. They did not like the same design we did not like, and they redesigned it so it's better. And then, but to finance the historic rehab of 4th and Washington, that project had to be linked to the construction project. I'm not a little unclear, but they're now more actively working on Washington Boulevard one. And on the website, it says it's going to be 160 studio apartments. It was 16 apartments. So I'd really like to know what, or is that a typo?
4th and Washington?
Yeah, I think it's a typo.
You can't fit that on that site.
I said, I think it's a typo.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, but anyway, so there's stuff happening with that. So I don't know if we should ask them for here, just give a little presentation. And I also see that the 2 at Montclair and Adams, the actual Montclair and Adams, the abode project, and the one at Bronson and Adams are topped out and beginning to get stuccoed, and so I don't know what we want to do with the information I just said, but I'd love to have an update on all of these housing projects at some point.
So I have connections to at PATH just because they're our client for other projects, not these. PATH has had a lot of staff turnover in the past couple of years, so can send out a phishing.
Yeah, well, the executive director of PATH just moved to become the director of PATH Ventures, which is the entity that's doing these 2 projects. And there's a new executive director of PATH who started work on Monday, according to an email I got.
Is that Joel you're talking about, or is that someone?
Well, if he was the executive director of PATH in general, he's now at Path Ventures, whoever, I mean, I'll look at the email.
If it's Joel, I know Joel personally, and I can email him and
Okay.
say, who do we talk to? Because it won't be him, but it will be someone on the staff. So.
Okay. Okay, well, anyway, that's a sort of weird update to prior cases, because these are old cases that probably everybody else on this meeting doesn't even know what we're talking about.
CIM continues to build on either side of 30th Street at Crenshaw. Don't know
Oh,
how.
those are going up fast.
You know, they had to dig a lot. They had to dig down 2 stories. I don't know what they're going to do with all that office space that's worth virtually nothing right these days, but they're building them, and they're big wealthy developers. So we'll see what happens with them.
Right.
So they're looking good though. I mean, they look as presented.
Well,
so.
maybe so John, maybe what we should think about is, and anybody else can weigh in, but maybe we should just, the next time we have a meeting, it's like, hey, we don't have any agenda items. Why don't we have that be the agenda item and invite all these folks?
Okay.
And Chris has her hand up.
Chris.
Get it? Okay, Laura, would it also be possible to get an update on the performing arts dance building that?
Oh, I would love one.
Because it's turned into sort of a warehouse box.
Yeah, it's certainly not the design we all expected.
And that was presented to.
I have emailed them a couple of times on a same but different topic, not hey, it's ugly. But I have not heard back, so I will try again. But you know, they were displeased with us. So I don't know.
Well, I'm just very displeased with a process where they present a design and they get input from the community, and we were supportive, and then it changes like night and day. So and if there were mandated reasons from the city why it had to have changed, it'd be nice for the community to understand how that process can turn so dramatically from.
Yeah, well, let's be specific. There basically are no windows on the building on Washington or Manhattan Place.
Yeah, there's no connectivity
None.
to the street now, you know, but it would be nice to have an update since we're getting close to, it looks like it's getting close to.
Right. Well, it would be, yes, but John and I can figure out when this could happen, and then we'll issue invitations and hope it can happen.
Great. Okay, it's 9:02. There's no other updates. I recommend that we adjourn the meeting.
So do it. So be it.
Okay, no more comments. I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thanks everybody for coming and participating.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good meeting. Bye.
Hold
Night,
on,
everyone.
I'm saving the chat. There we go.
Okay, good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
But yeah, we do need to remember to save the chat.